Good afternoon to Marakata and my fellow friends. My name is Mutazian from here.
My name is Hong Rushin, you can call me Kong.
My name is Lai Chen, can call me Lai. And to begin with, today's discussion is based on Sustainable Development Goal 14, Life Below Water. Our topic is, the ocean start on land. Who should lead in reducing marine plastic pollution? To introduce the issue, I would like us to imagine one ordinary plastic bottle. A person may use it for less than 30 minutes. However, after it thrown it away, it may remain in the environment for many years. Therefore, this simple example raises an important question. When we say we throw something away, where exactly is away? Roshan, what do you think happens after that bottle leaves our side?
That is the problem. Away is not really a place. Sometimes the bottle goes into a rubbish bin. Sometimes it ends up in a landfill. And sometimes heavy rain carries it into a drain, then into a river, and finally into the ocean. The bottle disappears from our side, but it does not disappear from the earth. According to the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, between 19 and 23 million tons of plastic waste enter the aquatic ecosystem every year. And UNEP compares this to about 2,000 garbage trucks of plastic being dumped into the ocean, rivers, and lakes every day. I found the comparison shocking because it shows that marine plastic pollution is not only caused by one careless person. It is connected to production, consumption, waste system, and also public policy. I would like to ask you, do you think plastic itself is the real enemy?
In my opinion, not always. Plastic is useful in hospitals, food safety, sanitation, and emergency service. Therefore, banning every form of plastic immediately may not be the practical or safe. The deeper problem is the system that turns a useful material into disposal waste. I think we should distinguish between necessary and avoidable plastic by asking two questions. The first one is, does plastic serve an essential purpose? And the second one is, there's already a practical and affordable alternative. A stereopractical series has an important purpose. However, a disposable spoon wrapped in another plastic wrapper and placed inside another plastic bag may not be equally as necessary. Personally, I feel uncomfortable when a few minutes of convenience create damage that may affect marine life and future generations.
Yes, I agree with you. At the same time, we should also remember that IPG-Pelajar is broader than plastic pollution. It includes marine biodiversity, healthy habitats, and the sustainable use of ocean resources. However, plastic is a useful focus because it clearly shows how decisions made on land can damage life below water. More importantly, marine plastic pollution often begins long before plastic reaches the sea. It may begin when a company designs unnecessary packaging. It may continue when consumers are given few affordable alternatives. It may become worse when collection, drainage, or recycling system fail. As a result, by the time we see a bottle floating in the ocean, several other decisions have already failed. Therefore, our central idea is responsibility follows power, not guilt. Everyone has a role, but those with greater power should carry greater responsibility.
Then perhaps we should begin at the earlier stage before the consumer even touches the product, the design stage.
So, before a plastic bottle reaches the shop, a producer has already decided its material, shape, packaging, and also price. Businesses also decided whether a product can be reused, refilled, or recycled recycled. This means that plastic falls in the ocean may begin as a design decision made far away from the coast. For example, imagine a packet of biscuit. Each biscuit may be individually wrapped, and then all the packets are placed inside another layer of plastic. The consumer sees the final product, but the waste was already created at the design stage. So, when the company asks, why do consumers not recycle more? Consumer may also ask, why was this product designed to create so much waste? In my opinion, businesses should reduce unnecessary packaging, develop refill system, and consider the complete life cycle of their products.
I agree with your point, and I want to challenge businesses further. Sometimes a recycling symbol is printed on packaging, even though local recycling facilities cannot process the material. When recycling fails, the consumer is blamed. That feels unfair because the producer have had more power at the beginning of the product's life. However, should we treat every business in exactly the same way? A multinational corporation may have interesting technical experts, and control over international supply chains. A small food seller may have limited money and very few affordable packaging choices. Like, do you think large corporations and small businesses should follow the same deadlines?
For me, I think the environmental direction should be the same, but the transition does not necessarily have to be identical. On the one hand, large corporations have greater resources, technical capacity, and influence. Therefore, they should move faster and accept stronger producer responsibility. On the other hand, small businesses should still follow environmental rules, but they may need affordable suppliers, technical guidance, financial support, and a realistic transition period. In other words, responsibility must be proportionate to power and resources. However, voluntary action alone may not be enough. A responsible company may spend more on sustainable packaging while it is competitor continue using cheaper and more harmful materials. Without common standards, the responsible company may be placed at a disadvantage.
Exactly. That is why government regulation is necessary. Governments can create common expectations for all producers, but the rules must be practiced and clear. Businesses need to know which material is acceptable, what deadlines apply, how progress will be measured, and also what support is available. There is also a hidden concern, economic issue. A product may be cheap at the checkout counter, but expensive for society after it becomes waste. The customer may not pay for public cleanup costs, damaged marine habitats, tourism losses, or the burden placed on future generations. A company should not earn short-term profit from the disposable products when expecting communities and taxpayers to manage the waste later. Still, once the product reaches the shop, it enters the hands of the consumer.
At this stage, personal behavior becomes relevant. Individuals decided whether to bring reusable bags or bottles, whether to accept unnecessary disposal items, and whether to throw rubbish into the correct bin. People can also support responsible businesses, join recycling programs, and take part in river or beach cleanup. One person's actions may seem small, but habits can influence families, schools, and communities. Children learn from parents, friends influence one another, and students learn from teachers. Therefore, individuals should not say, my action is too small to matter. However, environmental discussions sometimes blame consumers too quickly. Like, it is fair to blame low-income families when environmentally friendly alternatives may cost more.
Of course, no. I don't think that is fair. For example, a low-income family may choose a cheaper product because food, rent, transport, and education are more urgent priorities. However, that doesn't mean that the families cares less about the environment. For this reason, sustainable living should not become a privilege available only to people who can afford expensive alternatives. Therefore, governments and businesses must make responsible choices accessible and affordable. At the same time, limited choices do not remove every personal responsibility. People can still avoid littering, refusing unnecessary items, and dispose of what waste properly whenever possible. How much choice do consumers really have when most affordable products are already packaged in plastic?
From my perspective, their choices are often more limited than environmental campaigns suggest. For example, a person may bring a reusable shopping bag, but most products inside the supermarket may already be covered in plastic. The consumer did not design the packaging. The consumer only needs the product near the end of the process. Companies often tell customers to choose better, but those choices are shaped by price, availability, packaging design, and also advertising. A consumer cannot choose a plastic-free product that the market does not provide. Consumer demand still has an influence. If enough people reject excessive packaging or also request refillable products, business may respond. So, consumers are not powerless, but they cannot transform the whole market alone. Neil, what is your opinion?
In my opinion, our position is balanced. Individual responsibility is real, but individual powers is limited. Personal action should support structural change, not replace it. An individual can refuse one's role. A family can separate household waste, but their family cannot build a national recycling system. People should participate in change, but they could not carry the greatest burden. After the consumer finishes using a product, the next stage depends heavily on public waste system.
So we can infer that the discussion now moves from personal behavior to government responsibility.
Yes, once plastic becomes waste, whether it is collected, recycled, buried, burned or carried into a river may depend on public infrastructure. Unlike individuals and businesses, government possesses the authority to create laws, regulate packaging, improve waste collection, manage drainage and river system, punish illegal dumping and coordinate local authorities. More importantly, marine protection cannot begin only at the coastline. It must include the full pathway from street and drains to river and the ocean. Malaysia roadmap towards zero single-use plastic 2018 to 2030 is relevant because it uses a phased approach and recognizes shared responsibility among government, industry, civil society, and consumer. I support that direction. However, the real gap is often not between having a policy and having no policy. Instead, it is between announcing a policy and making it work consistently. Kong is introducing a policy now.
I don't think so. A policy is meaningful only when it works in everyday life. For example, imagine that households are asked to separate recyclable waste. If the collection truck later mixes all the rubbish together, people may lose confidence in the system. Similarly, charging customers for plastic bags may reduce their use, but it can also marine pollution if producers continue creating excessive packaging and waste infrastructure remains weak. Governments must do more than announce package. They must provide clear standards, proper infrastructure, and also consistent enforcement.
Yeah, I fully agree with Tom's point, and I would like to add on that public trust is essential. People are more likely to support a policy when they understand why it exists and believe that the burden is fair. The government should explain how environmental change charges are used, whether companies are meeting their targets, and whether plastic use is actually decreasing. People may receive policies if they feel that only consumers are being blamed, while major producers remain unchanged. Transparency is therefore part of fairness.
Yes, I agree with you. In addition to enforcement, government leadership must include monitoring and accountability. Malaysia should not only announce reduction targets, it should measure whether plastic use is decreasing, whether collection systems are improving, and whether less waste is entering drains and rivers. Furthermore, the results should be reported publicly. After all, a policy may look impressive on paper, but implementation determines whether it protects life below water. For instance, if waste system fail, a plastic item may move from a street to a drain, from the drain to a river, and finally into the sea. At that point, people may organize a beach cleanup. Although the cleanup is useful, it deals with the result rather than the results. In short, a beach cleanup removes visible waste, prevention stops the next wave of waste.
It is a good point of view, but that leads to a difficult policy question. How quickly should Malaysia reduce single-use plastic? For my opinion, I support strong action, but I worry about the gradual. Sometimes, gradual change becomes an excuse of endless delay. Businesses and governments may continue discussing future plans while the plastic continues entering the river and oceans. The oceans does not pause when society waits for a perfect solution. Therefore, I will support the rapid removal of clearly unnecessary products when affordable alternatives already exist. How? Do you think a gradual phase-out will create new progress, or would it allow businesses to delay responsibility?
In my view, it could do either, depending on how the policy is designed. A weak phase-out with no deadlines could become a form of delay. However, an immediate total ban on every single-use plastic item could create shortages, confusion, and also unfair pressure on small businesses. Some replacement materials may also have environmental costs of their own. So, I suggest 3 categories. First, unnecessary products that can be removed quickly. Second, products that require affordable alternatives and also a transition period. Last but not least, essential products used for medical, hygiene, or safety purposes that may receive limited exemptions.
Yes, I understand both of your position. On the other hand, I do not support an overnight ban on every plastic product. On the other hand, rejecting an immediate total ban doesn't mean accepting slow or a weak action. Therefore, the government should set firm deadline for avoidable plastic, require large corporations to move earlier, and provide genuine support to small businesses. Ultimately, the policy should be firm in direction but fair in implementation. Neil, would those conditions make the phased approach acceptable to you?
For me, I would say yes, but it is under 4 conditions. The first one is deadline must be clear, and the second one, progress must be measured and reported publicly. And the third one is large corporations should not receive unnecessary delays. And the last one, affordable alternative must be available to small businesses and ordinary consumers. With those conditions, a phased approach will not simply be a delay. It will become a planned and accountable transition. I would therefore change my opinion. I still support rapid action, but I can accept a phased approach if it includes clear deadlines and public accountability.
I believe that our compromise is clear. Malaysia should not ban every plastic product overnight, but it should set firm deadlines to phase out unnecessary single-use plastic. This protects the environment without ignoring economic, health, and also social realities. Before moving to education, we should return directly to SDG 14. Our discussion has focused on production, prices, consumers, and public system. Someone might ask, are we still discussing life below water? The answer is yes. Plastic can damage marine habitats, entangle animals, and break down into microplastic. Those particles can enter marine food chains and affect organisms at different levels of the ecosystem. Reducing plastic is therefore not only about thinking beaches look cleaner, it is about protecting the balance of marine ecosystem.
Yes, I would like to add on that protecting marine ecosystem is also connected to human well-being. Healthy oceans support food, tourism, livelihoods, and coastal communities. When marine ecosystems are damaged, the consequences do not remain underwater. They return to society through economic losses, food insecurity, and environmental risk. The real conflict is not simply environment or economy. It's often short-term convenience versus long-term sustainability.
Yes, SDG 14 is broader than plastic pollution. For example, the Food Agriculture Organization reported in its 2025 assessment that 35.5% of assessed marine fish stock were overfished. This reminds us that life below water also concerns sustainable resources management. Nevertheless, plastic remains our selected focus because it clearly demonstrates how failure on land can damage the wider ocean system. In addition, long-term prevention also depends on how people understand this connection. Neil, how can education contribute without replacing government and businesses' responsibility?
It is a good question. As a future teachers, we should be realistic. Education cannot replace government regulation or producer responsibility. A teacher cannot redesign a national waste management system, and students should not be expected to solve an environmental crisis created by powerful adults and institutions. However, education can help students understand those systems, evaluate evidence, and also participate responsibly. UNESCO concept of ocean literacy focuses on understanding the ocean's influence on people and people's influence on the ocean. This matters even for students who live far from the coast because their waste may still under drains, rivers, and eventually the sea.
That is a meaningful point, but teachers already have many responsibilities. What that in mind, is it realistic to include SDG 14 in school learning without creating another burden for teachers and students?
I would like to answer that it is integrated wisely. Environmental education can be connected to English discussions, science, geography, civic education, and project-based learning. The aim is not to make students feel guilty. The aim is to help them understand causes, evidence, and possible solutions.
I think that schools should move beyond slogans such as do not litter or save the ocean. Students should learn to ask deeper questions such as where did this product come from? Who designed the packaging? Was all the packaging necessary? Where will the waste go? Who benefits? And also who pays for the environmental damage? Teachers should also help students evaluate environmental claims made by companies. Students need to recognize when sustainability is supported by evidence and when it may simply be used as marketing. A practical activity could be a plastic waste audit in the school canteen. For 1 week, students could record which plastic items are used, which are necessary, and which are avoidable. Who selects the packaging, where the waste goes, and also which alternatives are affordable. They could then present recommendation to the school administration or canteen operator.
That activity is valuable because it connects classroom learning with real system. For example, a beach cleanup teaches care, while a waste audit teaches causation. In other words, the audit helps students understand why waste was created and how it could be prevented before reaching the environment. Moreover, it also allows students to practice discussion, research, evidence evaluation, and problem solving.
That's true. It also means that teachers must also keep environmental education fair and inclusive. Some students may not be able to afford expensive reusable products, and environmental education should not suggest that students from low-income families care less about the planet. The moral purpose of a teacher is not to make children carry the burden of adult failures. It to help them to become ethical, informed, and critical citizens. We are not teaching students to clean up after every failure of society. Meanwhile, we are teaching them to question why the failure happens and how it can be prevented.
I totally agree with you. Education does not replace structural change, but it prepares future citizens to understand, support, and also improve that change. We have now followed the issue from production, consumption, from waste management to the ocean, and finally to classroom understanding. We should now return to our central questions. Who should lead? My final position is that government should lead the system, while major producer should lead changes in product design. Governments create laws and infrastructure. Businesses decide what enters the market every day. If products are designed for disposal, communities will continue cleaning up the consequences. However, small businesses should receive practical support during the transition.
I agree with you, but I want to emphasize fairness. Individuals must participate, but they should not become the easiest group to blame. A consumer can refuse one plastic bag. A multinational company can redesign millions of products. The government can change an entire national system. Power is clearly unequal. Therefore, marine plastic pollution is a shared responsibility, but it's not an equal responsibility. Responsibility should follow power, not you.
Well, from a government perspective, leadership should include more than passing law. It should include clear standard, infrastructure, enforcement, support for affected groups, measurable targets, and public reporting. At the same time, large producers should accept responsibility for what they design and sell. Individuals should act responsible and support better policies. Teachers should prepare informed citizens who understand how decisions on land affect life below water. So, our shared position is government should lead the system, producers should be designed at the source, individuals should participate, and teachers should educate. Based on our discussion, my recommendation is strong and transparent government leadership. Malaysia should set clear deadlines, improve waste infrastructure, enforce regulation, and report measurable progress. At the same time, policies should be urgent but fair, especially towards small businesses and low-income communities.
For me, my recommendation is stronger producer responsibility. Large companies should reduce excessive packaging, develop refill or return system, and design products for reuse or realistic recycling. They should consider the whole life cycle of their products.
And my recommendation is meaningful and inclusive environmental education. Schools should have more beyond slogans and help students investigate real waste system, compare perspectives, and propose practical solutions. Education should empower students, not shame them.
Yes, at the beginning of our discussion, we imagined one ordinary plastic bottle and asked, where is a way?
We now understand that away does not mean waste has disappeared. It may simply mean that the consequences have moved beyond our sight.
And when waste leave our sight, responsibility should not live with it.
That plastic item may end its journey in the ocean,
But the decision that sent it there began on land.
If the ocean starts on land, the solution must also start on land, in factories, in laws, in schools, in shops, and in our daily choices.
government must lead,
Producer must redesign.
Individuals must participate, and teachers must educate.
the
best way to clean the ocean is to stop treating it as the final destination of our waste. Thank you.